So one of the craziest things that people are becoming more and more aware of in American politics right now is the unbelievable bias against Governor Ron DeSantis of Florida. Now, if you're a long-term viewer of this channel, you'll remember I actually covered a story related to DeSantis' gubernatorial race opponent, Andrew Gillum, and how the media were backing him, and I explained then that the media hate Ron DeSantis because he beat Andrew Gillum. Andrew Gillum, black governor or black governor candidate, didn't actually end up winning, black mayor from Florida, that they thought was definitely going to be the next Obama. He was going to be the Democratic governor that won the swing state of Florida, that was going to use that as a launching pad to win the nomination and beat Trump. And when DeSantis, a Trump ally, ended up beating him in that race, the media couldn't stand it. So they were just looking for opportunities to attack him. And the attacks on DeSantis, specifically related to COVID-19, have seemed to hit a fever pitch, even though all throughout the process, they've been targeting him based on the fact that they don't like him. But people, I feel like, are starting to see through it. People, I feel like, are starting to understand that the media has no credibility whatsoever when they discuss politicians' performance in relation to this virus. And one of the best examples, before I get into any of the videos that I actually want to delve deep into, is this clip I found on accident from TYT of Francesca Fiorentini saying that CNN might be biased for DeSantis.
Democratic Governor Cuomo is under fire for lying about COVID deaths. Republican Governor of Florida, Ron DeSantis, seems to see his star rise and rise, even though he's done the same when it comes to COVID deaths. And articles like this are helping him do it. This is from CNN. A year into the pandemic, Florida is booming and Republican Governor DeSantis is taking credit. And then from the article, DeSantis has gambled to take a laissez-faire approach appears to be paying off, at least politically, at least for now, as other governors capturing attention in the opening phase of the pandemic now face steeper challenges. That's from Jeff Zeleny of CNN. Maybe a cousin of Ron DeSantis, because my God, this is some good PR for him. Maybe a cousin of Ron DeSantis.
Look, this has nothing to do with the larger topics that I want to talk about in this video, but imagine being this delusional. Imagine being this out of touch with reality that you'd actually start off your video talking about how Cuomo's getting criticism, and then you'd quote from CNN of all places the one positive reference that says DeSantis is benefiting politically from the way that he's handled COVID, and then say DeSantis must have a cousin or something in CNN that wrote this article. Francesca Fiorentini of the B team of the Young Turks thinks that there might be familial bias in CNN with Governor Ron DeSantis. Has this woman not seen any of the interviews with host Chris Cuomo and his brother Andrew Cuomo where he was puffing him up while Andrew Cuomo was actively lying about his numbers? The idea that you would make this point is so asinine and mind-blowing that even though, again, it doesn't have a lot to do with what I want to talk about today, I had to include it in here because Francesca Fiorentini,
maybe a cousin of Ron DeSantis,
has no connection to reality whatsoever, and if I haven't made that clear in any of the other videos I talked about before, this is a beautiful example of this. However, that's not what I want to talk about. What I want to talk about is the Young Turks and the mainstream media going with this idea that Ron DeSantis of Florida is suppressing the number of deaths in his state, despite the fact that this is clear and obvious COVID misinformation that, according to the social media overlords, should not be allowed to spread on this platform. Let's hear it from Anna Kasparian first and foremost.
A new study seems to confirm what many have already suspected regarding the number of coronavirus deaths in the state of Florida. Now, Florida, under the leadership of Governor DeSantis, was one of the first states to open things up and just go back to normal as if we're not dealing with a global pandemic. And what was interesting was, fairly recently there were comparative analyses done, showing how California fared compared to Florida. Florida opened everything up. California at the time had still shut everything down, but the numbers of coronavirus cases and deaths seemed pretty comparable. So what was going on there?
So this is what really bothers the left wing. It's that Ron DeSantis of Florida acted differently from the overwhelming majority of governors when faced with the COVID-19 pandemic. he decided that he wasn't going to lock down his state for very long. He wasn't going to enforce mandates on his population. What he was going to focus on were the elderly people who are most vulnerable, and let everybody else kind of assess their own risk, because he didn't want to deny you the right to participate in the economy, which is a natural right that should not be infringed upon by the government. And the results of DeSantis's experiment, because he focused so much on protecting the elderly and not restricting the freedom of everybody else, is that Florida is doing much better than expected and is comparable to California, despite the fact that Florida has a significantly older population than California.
Well, it turns out that some researchers argue that the way officials in Florida count coronavirus deaths is a little skewed in a favorable direction for DeSantis, and I'll explain how. Researchers came to that conclusion by comparing the number of estimated deaths for a 6-month period in 2020, that was from March to September of last year, to the actual number of deaths that occurred, a figure known as excess deaths because they exceed the estimate. There were 400,000 excess deaths known, or excess deaths across the United States in 2020, okay? So when you look at Florida specifically, the researchers say 4,924 excess deaths should have been counted as resulting from COVID-19, but for the most part, they were ruled as having been caused by something else.
So this is the lie right here. I don't want to draw it out. I don't want to set it up like, oh, maybe this could be true and then debunk it later. I'm telling you right here and now that this is the untruth, the COVID misinformation being spread by the Young Turks in this video. The idea that Florida actually isn't doing just about as well, actually in reality they're doing better, which we'll get into later, than the state of California, because Florida, they're doing something sketchy with their COVID death counts. They're not counting the proper number of people, and researchers, plural, are making the case that they figured out what's behind the curtain in Ron DeSantis' state. So if you go to the description of this video and you actually look at the source that the Young Turks cite for this video, what you'll find is that this isn't researchers coming to this conclusion, and he's using data from the National Institute of Health and he's using data from the Center for Disease Control. But what this guy did is he laser focused in only on the state of Florida's excess deaths to make the case that Florida should be counting more excess deaths as COVID cases than they actually are. But in reality, this is not unusual. If you looked at any state in the union, what you'll find, because we have so many different measures of how we're counting COVID deaths, is that a lot of states, including the state of California, under this standard, if it were applied equally, should be counting more of their excess deaths as COVID cases. And one of the reasons why you know that this is totally nonsensical is because if you scroll down in this very article, Yahoo News reached out to the CDC for confirmation on these statistics. And the report from Laura Rawson, a statistician at the National Center for Health Statistics at the Centers for Disease Control, who analyzed excess deaths throughout the country, not just in the state of Florida, to push a narrative, was that Florida does not stand out to her. That's a quote. She saw nothing exceptionally suspicious in the state's excess death count. So already from the jump, this whole story is built upon a giant lie. The Young Turks and the media are highlighting one researcher who is specifically zeroing in on the state of Florida to make the state of Florida look bad and saying that they're counting their excess deaths in a way that they shouldn't be doing that. Now, you can find the same patterns in a bunch of different states, including the comparison state in the state of California, if you looked at the data sets yourselves. And everybody who's involved in this, even people with an incentive in government to go after DeSantis, says that there's nothing suspicious. But since this one guy says it and the left really doesn't like DeSantis, we have an entire video with Florida lying about their numbers.
I want to bring you in because as I was reading the way that they manipulate numbers like this, it made me think of George Floyd and how they tried to blame George Floyd's death on anything other than the fact that Derek Chauvin basically suffocated him to death with his knee, right? It was like, no, it was actually the fentanyl. No, it was actually his this or his that.
I love that Anna went to the George Floyd case as an example and then stated something completely wrong related to it, because it just goes to show you how disconnected from reality she actually is. She says, it reminds me of people who say that George Floyd wasn't suffocated to death by Derek Chauvin's knee. Well, Anna Kasparian, I got news for you. Nobody is making that case. If you look at the autopsy report, it says that Floyd died due to complications from restraint and neck compression during his arrest. In no way, shape, or form is this equivalent to suffocation. So even according to the prosecution side of the story, if you believe that, Anna Kasparian is completely wrong and misinformed, just like everything she's delivering in this story.
Florida manipulating numbers? No.
Ada Rodriguez with a worthless take? No. I bet she's gonna go with racism pretty soon.
And meanwhile, the people who are dying are the ones that don't have access to the healthcare that they have access to, or any of the information and the stuff that they have access to. I think that I truly, wholeheartedly believe that they've been manipulating numbers.
Again, the Young Turks is allowed to spread this misinformation all they want on their platform. It goes completely unchallenged, even though she's just saying, I believe that they're manipulating their numbers. I mean, the CDC and the National Institute for Health say no. We have one researcher, and even in the article that we're citing, this researcher is heavily contradicted in his conclusions, as a sole researcher with a political agenda often is. But we definitely believe it, because honestly, the people who are dying from this, those are people that they don't care about. I wonder where this is going.
I truly, wholeheartedly believe that they've been manipulating numbers. They've been throwing that in our faces because the people who are dying are people who belong to groups that don't really matter to these people.
Again, this is pure projection. Their golden boy, Andrew Cuomo, who they gave an Emmy to for telling the truth in his press conferences, is literally caught dead to rights lying about deaths in nursing homes, which was a huge driver of the deaths in a lot of the states in the union that followed Andrew Cuomo's lead, because he was being pushed by people in the media who didn't know anything and were just looking for an anti-Trump. That's why Andrew Cuomo's book was a bestseller before all this scandal came out, and that's why a lot of states copied him and a lot of elderly people who didn't need to die died. Ron DeSantis doesn't have the same death number issues because he knew that a big portion of his population was elderly, and he knew that he wanted to protect them, and he thought Cuomo's move was a bad move. So instead of saying DeSantis had the foresight to see that packing sick people that have positive tests into nursing homes was a bad idea, they decide that because Cuomo was definitely caught manipulating numbers, and that's their boy, because they hate Ron DeSantis for beating their other guy, Andrew Gillum, they've decided that he must be suppressing numbers too, even though there's no indication of that whatsoever.
And then the people who are dying are older people, Black and brown people, poor people, people in marginalized situations. So of course that it's very possible that they are manipulating the numbers because, as usual in America, those people don't matter.
Again, they're manipulating the numbers because, as usual in the United States of America, those people don't matter. Again, there is not a governor in the country who treated the elderly population worse than the governor of New York, Andrew Cuomo. Ron DeSantis is definitely reliant as an elected official on his elderly people. He tilted his whole vaccine rollout distribution plan to serve elderly who are the most vulnerable people. But Ada Rodriguez is saying that he's ageist and racist, and, she'll probably sprinkle in some sexism there if given the opportunity.
Yeah, I mean, you make a really great point.
Anna, she did not make a great point. She made no good point at all whatsoever. It was a terrible point, and she ought to be embarrassed with the point that she made. But again, she's Ada Rodriguez. She never makes any good points. All she does is racialize stuff and say, I believe, I feel, and racism, and don't forget the marginalized people. That's all Ada Rodriguez ever brings to the table. But again, just not true.
Excess deaths were at 21% nationwide for 2020, and that's according to CDC figures. Florida saw a 15.5% rate of excess deaths for the period that was studied. California's excess death rate was also 15%, despite that state's governor, Gavin Newsom, having enacted much more stringent restrictions than did DeSantis in Florida. So obviously the difference in excess deaths between California and Florida is notable, and you should keep that in mind.
So if you're ever under the illusion that Anna Kasparian knows what she's talking about, that she's a well-informed person who has good reading comprehension skills, then that clip should disabuse you of that notion. Because what Anna Kasparian just did was read part of the Yahoo News article that rebuts the claim of the researcher that she's citing to say that Florida is lying about their excess deaths and they're actually doing a lot worse. Because the national average is 21%, Florida's at 15.5%, and California is at 15%. And Anna says the difference between California and Florida is significant, but the article says the opposite. It says the difference is negligible despite the fact that DeSantis did not enact anywhere near the restrictions that California did. Also, we would expect Florida's excess death total to be higher than California due to the fact that Florida has the second oldest population in the union per capita behind only Maine, yet Anna Kasparian reads this. She reads an article that contradicts exactly what she's going to take away from it, and she just goes on business as usual. This is 100% an example of Anna Kasparian and the Young Turks looking at the headline of an article, deciding to find a source after the fact, and then clipping clips from that source that they think support their narrative, but not being intelligent enough to realize when they're reading something that's going to contradict every point that they make. The article that they cited at Yahoo News, I don't even want to hate on it because they reported on what this researcher said, but they reached out to relevant figures and they disputed the major claims of that article. So the journalists actually did their job. The fake journalists that are reading from a Yahoo News article completely failed in reading comprehension. Now, don't get me wrong, it's not just the Young Turks doing this. An online outlet with poor journalistic standards, this is what we can expect if they have a left-wing perspective. But it's also respected media institutions, or at least media institutions with the veneer of respect, like 60 Minutes. There's a pair of clips circulating across the internet right now which juxtapose Ron DeSantis' actual answer to a question to what appeared on the 60 Minutes show when they were talking about this supposed controversy of Ron DeSantis giving exclusivity to Publix to distribute the COVID-19 vaccine. And the stark difference between these two clips, the amount of content that was just carved out of it to frame DeSantis as this bad guy that corruptly is putting his campaign contributors ahead of his elderly population in Florida, is absolutely stunning, which is why this clip has gone so viral. Now, I'm going to label these two clips for you so that you can see for yourself what exactly 60 Minutes cut out and how crucial it is to the story that they're trying to report, because it directly disputes absolutely everything that 60 Minutes is pushing in their segment, and that's why they cut it out. It was only to be deceptive. That's the only reason for making these editing choices. Cutting the clip shorter does not give you more information. It doesn't streamline information. It specifically only gives you less information.
Publix, as you know, donated $100,000 to your campaign, and then you rewarded them with the exclusive rights to distribute the vaccination in Palm Beach.
So first of all, what you're saying is wrong.
How is that not pay to play?
That's a fake narrative.
So right there, we have the cut from 60 Minutes, and I just want you to hear what DeSantis was saying in the part that they left out, and we'll pick back up with the 60 Minutes clip where it resumes when they line up again.
So first of all, when we did the first pharmacies that had it were CVS and Walgreens, and they had a long-term care mission. So they were going to the long-term care facilities. They got vaccine in the middle of December. They started going to the long-term care facilities the third week of December to do LTCs. So that was their mission. That was very important, and we trusted them to do that. As we got into January, we wanted to expand the distribution points. So yes, you had the counties, you had some drive-through sites, you had hospitals that were doing a lot, but we wanted to get it into communities more. So we reached out to other retail pharmacies, Publix, Walmart. Obviously, CVS and Walgreens had to finish that mission, and we said we're gonna use you as soon as you're done with that. For the Publix, they were the first one to raise their hand, say they were ready to go.
Again, that's another cut, and it's not like these aren't crucial pieces of information. Remember, the whole allegation is that DeSantis gave priority to Publix, which is a local Florida campaign contributor, and DeSantis' answer talks about how they actually gave priority to CVS and Walgreens.
And you know what? We did it on a trial basis. I had 3 counties. I actually showed up that weekend and talked to seniors across 4 different Publix. How was the experience? Is this good? Should you think this is the way to go? And it was 100% positive, so we expanded it, and then folks liked it. And I can tell you, if you look at a place like Palm Beach County, they were kind of struggling at first in terms of the senior numbers. I met with the county mayor, I met with the administrator, I met with all the folks at Palm Beach County, and I said, here's some of the options. We can do more drive-through sites. We can give more to hospitals. We can do the Publix. We can do this. They calculated that 90% of their seniors live within a mile and a half of a Publix. And they said, we think that would be the easiest thing for our residents.
But Melissa McKinley, the county commissioner in the Glades, told us the governor never met with her about the Publix deal.
So we did that, and what ended up happening was you had 65 Publix in Palm Beach. Palm Beach is one of the biggest counties, one of the most elderly counties. We've done almost 75% of the seniors in Palm Beach, and the reason is because you have the strong retail footprint. So our way has been multifaceted. It has worked. And we're also now very much expanding CVS and Walgreens now that they've completed the long-term care mission.
The criticism is that it's pay to play.
And it's wrong. It's wrong. It's a fake narrative. I just disabused you of the narrative, and you don't care about the facts because obviously I laid it out for you in a way that is irrefutable.
Well,
and so it's clearly not.
Isn't there the nearest
No, you're wrong. You're wrong.
Again, these are not insignificant cuts by 60 Minutes. The entire premise of their segment is that Ron DeSantis gave priority and exclusivity to Publix, a campaign contributor, over other companies that didn't contribute as much. It turns out that DeSantis actually gave priority and first access to the vaccine to CVS and Walgreens because they had the best infrastructure to go out into the nursing homes to vaccinate people in their retirement care facilities. Then, while they were still completing that mission, they decided to look for another retailer to better help distribute it. And they were thinking of Walmart and they were thinking of Publix because they had the infrastructure and pharmacies to be closer to the populations that they were trying to help. And it turns out that Publix was closer to like 90% of seniors than any other big company that they could work to distribute the vaccine. Also, it was guaranteed to CVS and Walmart that when they were done vaccinating people, actually going out and getting those people vaccinated, that they would be able to have the vaccine. So the whole idea that Publix got first and exclusive is just not the case. The first people that were tapped were CVS and Walgreens, not Publix. So everything about this is a lie. And the way that 60 Minutes edits this, it's like Ron DeSantis just got angry and didn't really respond in substance, even though he did refute and dispute their narrative completely. Also, on top of that, the relevant officials that DeSantis mentioned in his answer to 60 Minutes, they never reached out to. And these officials weren't even Republicans, and they said, yeah, 60 Minutes did not contact me. If they would have contacted me, then I would have told them that they're totally barking up the wrong tree when it comes to this. Now, it could be that Publix is donating to all these politicians, or it could be that DeSantis assessed the risk of not prioritizing the elderly people and just went with the company that had the best infrastructure. Now, to be clear, I'm not saying that campaign contributions are not something to look into when you're examining these decisions. But to be fair, you could probably do that in every state in the union, and you probably find more corrupting influences. When people have examined the Publix thing, they've realized that Publix is really the store that has the big foothold in Florida in order to best distribute vaccines for seniors to walk into. Just like CVS and Walgreens were better at going out to all these senior homes because they already had that infrastructure to deliver the vaccine to people inside the nursing homes. So while I have no problem examining conflicts of interest or the appearance of conflicts of interest, when you don't find what you're looking for and you actually find a really strong case that they're doing what is most effective based on the options that they have on the table, you don't just edit that part out. You don't just make up what you want to be true and present that to the American people as if it's fact because you can't stand DeSantis. What the left-wing media is doing, whether online media or established mainstream media, to Ron DeSantis is absolutely disgusting, and they ought to be embarrassed and ashamed. They should be double ashamed considering that they promoted Andrew Cuomo, and he's totally going to skate on the scandal that they're trying to push on him because they don't want to talk about what he actually did and the cover-up of nursing home deaths in New York State. The truth is, the media hates Ron DeSantis because they see him as the next Trump and also the better Trump. Because DeSantis fights back strong against the media, but unlike Trump, he actually has the discipline to know when not to fight back against the media, when to let a battle go and save his energy to fight later. Trump would fight everyone all the time, and while it was hilarious, it ended up creating more problems from him that he needed. DeSantis, not interested in that, so the media can try to gin up that hysteria, but he's just not that polarizing of a figure, so that's not going to work as well. That's why they're trying to bury him now before he gets the nomination, and he has a good shot at being president. But hey, those are just my thoughts. Let me know what your thoughts are down in the comments below. If you like this video, then show me by leaving a like. You can subscribe for more content. Follow me on all my social medias. You can support me via the support links in the description box. This has been me talking about the lies related to Ron DeSantis. Till next time.